After the Second World War, the desire to find peaceful solutions for problems and conflicts started 6 countries towards building a united Europe. They began with common control of the important steel and coal industries, which had been one trigger for war. In Strasbourg on the 10th of September 1952, the first meeting was held of the Common Assembly of the ECSC, the European Coal and Steel Community, initiating the European integration project. The member states, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg, sent representatives appointed from their national parliaments. The tension was high.
France's Foreign Minister, Robert Schuman.
At that time, Paul Callevold was the European Affairs correspondent in Alsace for Le Monde. He recalls how committed people were to their political responsibility.
On était dans la démocratie, mais on laissait.
We were in a democracy, but tended to leave things to the governments. The ministers at the time thought about that after the war and put forward some good ideas. So there was the confidence to do that, which I don't see today.
J'allais dire ce mot de confiance, voyez-vous, ce que je ne trouve pas aujourd'hui.
The creation of a European economic community put in place a common market, and the Euratom Treaty on Atomic Energy also became reality. The so-called Treaties of Rome were signed by the 6 members of the ECSC on the 25th of March, 1957. They created a common agricultural policy and later a customs union. The tough negotiations continued even as the signing ceremony approached.
L'imprimerie nationale à Paris, dont les camions devaient livrer les volumes.
The National Printing Works in Paris, whose trucks were to deliver the copies of the Treaty of Rome, couldn't because the negotiations were going on till the last minute. In Rome, they were to sign in these big books. You imagine that they contained the Treaty of Rome, but it was just the first and the last pages, where the ministers signed. Paul-Henri Spaak, Christian Pinault, and in between, the rest were just blank pages.
On l'a signé, mais en dessous, il n'y avait que du papier blanc.
Nonetheless, the European project continued. In 1962, the Assembly, with 142 members, was first officially called the European Parliament. Initially, member states, fearing they'd lose power, appointed MEPs. But in 1979, 181 million people from 9 countries in the by then enlarged community went to the polls for the first time to elect their European Parliament.
Il 10 giugno, per la prima volta nella storia, 180 milioni di europei di 9 paesi eleggeranno insieme il Parlamento europeo. Dai il tuo voto per la tua Europa.
When I was first elected to the European Parliament back in 1979, it was not a real parliament. It was a different planet with no connection to this earth, except when we had our salaries. Because the parliament had no say. We could make resolutions, but we had no say, no influence.
Direct elections were a major step forward, but falling turnouts over the years have reflected the Parliament's lack of power. On the 17th of July 1979, the first directly elected 410 MEPs of the European Parliament chose a woman as their president. Simone Veil and the rest of them prepared to do battle to win real power.
1987, we had the so-called Single European Act, and the European Parliament gained the right to put forward amendments. And later we got, in more areas, the possibility for putting forward amendments. And over the years, the European Parliament have gained real influence on the daily life of citizens.
Bond, a Eurosceptic, stresses a concern that democratic control has moved from the member states and from their voters to civil servants in Brussels, as only the non-elected Commission can propose laws. Others, like the left-wing group leader, Francis Wirtz, point out a loss of confidence of ordinary people towards the EU because of the creation of the world's largest trading area.
At the beginning, this was a project for peace, for reconciliation, bringing together Europe's people, unifying the continent. And that's had a tendency, in particular with the installation of the single market, to make it a Europe of businesses. I think that this evolutionary process must change, so that Europeans can again feel they can have confidence in Europe.
The Single European Act gave more say to the European Parliament, also with the assent process, a kind of right of veto for the representatives. But over time, the basis of the European Parliament has changed. Otto von Habsburg, oldest son of the last Austrian emperor and king of Hungary, was there at the EU's start and says he's still busy working for European unification.
Noch im ersten Parlament, da haben wir Leute aus den Berufen gehabt.
In the first parliament, we still had professional people. We had experts. Where do you find these people nowadays? They're few and far between, unfortunately. We should be working on getting those really experienced people back. If you haven't got your hands dirty, you won't have a clue what's going on. We simply have to work for it time and again, that those roots and the connection between the roots and the tree are restored.
Dass diese Wurzeln wieder, die Verbindung zwischen Wurzeln und dem Baum wiederhergestellt werden.
Still active and covering 100 events each year, the now 95-year-old publicist is preparing his latest book on the European unification. What does he think of Europe's role and the fears of the region's citizens?
The two most important treaties for us are the treaties of Rome and of Maastricht. The thing about Maastricht, which many haven't realized, is the meaning of subsidiarity. Because it really is, I'd go as far as saying, the fundamental law of a constitution. It means that power should not be concentrated in one pair of hands, but rather that everything is built from the bottom up. You must construct a house starting at the bottom and not starting with the roof.
The Treaty on the European Union signed in Maastricht creates further European integration. The so-called co-decision procedure gives the Council and the Parliament an equal status in the legislative process. From now on, the Council can't adopt a common position if it doesn't reach agreement with the Parliament. And if that doesn't occur, the legislative process has to be broken off. The Treaty of Amsterdam increases that to strengthen the European Parliament further. In January this year in Strasbourg, as the new president was inaugurated, various former presidents were on hand, including Simone Veil, who gave her view on today's European Parliament.
I would say that there's much more responsibility, that the people who are there are, with a few exceptions, people who want the Parliament to exist, to act, to take decisions and take a role in Europe.
The European Parliament, and now its 785 MEPs, are the directly elected democratic instrument for 493 million Europeans.